a lot of things we need to get done in Riverside County, and we need federal help to do it. And I know when we talked, Mary and I talked to her office here recently, a couple of weeks ago, in Washington, D.C., about an export-import bank representative for Riverside County. Many of you may not have heard that term before, but we are very actively pursuing import and export businesses as a way to help offset some of our local losses. And we're doing a great job of it in Riverside County. We've got meetings just about every week. I hosted a delegation from Beijing, China, just last week. The amount of Canadian investment in foreign export of our agriculture is huge, and we made it larger by establishing a county office of foreign trade. But we need the help of the federal government to have an import-export bank representative full-time assigned here. I know Mary's been working on that. We've worked with her office to expand foreign trade zones. Currently, we have 4 foreign trade zones, and we're seeking to get a 5th one in the eastern Coachella Valley. Our trade agreements with the South Korean government went into effect in March. This is a free trade agreement like several others, lowering barriers to commerce. And if you're in an area like ours that has airports, highways, and free trade zones around those key infrastructure parts, it could be a huge benefit in local jobs. And so that's what the kinds of things that we're working with Congresswoman Mary Bono. And we appreciate her help in all of those areas. You know, when you have a representative who is in their 8th term in the House of Representatives, Mary, it's hard for me to believe that the first event that I attended in support of Mary Bono was now almost 16 years ago. That you've been there a long time, and in the organization called the House of Representatives, seniority matters. And I got to tell you that having senior members there is hugely important. Mary was very effective from the start, but I'm sure she would agree that she can be a much more effective member with in her 8th term than she could in her 1st or 2nd term. It's just the way that organization works. She serves as the chairwoman of the Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, becoming the first Republican woman in history to hold a gavel on one of the oldest standing committees in the House. That committee dates back to 1795. Mary graduated from the University of Southern California in 1984, managed and owned a popular restaurant in Palm Springs with her husband, Sonny, where she developed an appreciation for the challenges that face small business. We're extremely pleased to have Mary Bono as our representative in Congress, and particularly pleased that she's here today to join us with an update. Thank you very much, Mary.
Good morning. Thank you, John, very much for the introduction. I just want to start by saying I think this is the first time I'm before most of you as a grandmother. I'm a grandmother now. A beautiful little boy, little Sonny, was born on Big Sonny's birthday. So God works in mysterious ways. And yeah, so anyway, I have pictures on my iPad. Anybody wants to see them after breakfast? My grandson. But I want to thank you all for $100 that can be better served after providing health care to people. So thank you for asking the question, and I'm glad to work with you. And the county, John, for you to know, the county's been fantastic on this. And there's a terrific partnership between all of us. People care about this. And yesterday at my town hall meeting, the county was well represented. So I thank you for everything that you're doing to make sure there's a local focus on this.
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Randy. Good morning.
Can you give us an update on progress or lack thereof of the federal budget? It just seems to go on and on. We haven't had one for 3 years. So any news there?
Great question. My prediction is there won't be a budget that will be signed into law, of course, once again. The debate on the budget is critically important. It is the most important issue right now in Washington, D.C. And it is politics, probably the way it's always been bantered around. It's the same thing. Either you want to reform the budget or you want to promise people two chickens in every pot, and that's where we are. We are fighting over very serious issues. And I want to just go to Obamacare. If you want to talk about the Obamacare problem, in my mind, nobody in this room can say that the healthcare system isn't messed up, entirely messed up. We all know that it is. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, we know it's messed up. But the answer is either you reform healthcare and you bring in more individual control, more individual participation, you strengthen the patient-doctor relationship, and you remove the government. Or the other option is to increase the size of government and to put the government in charge. These are two very fundamental different approaches to healthcare. But in my view, you can only do it if you actually give control to the patient and doctor and how you provide healthcare. I think there's very noble things within Obamacare, without a doubt. And I think that I wish cooler heads would sometimes prevail and talk about some of the good things that are in it. But I'm also at the same time hopeful that the Supreme Court rules in our favor that Obamacare is unconstitutional. But I think we need a real serious discussion. For example, why is healthcare tethered only to the workplace? We as individuals should own our own healthcare, not our employer. We as individuals should choose the healthcare that we want, not our employer. And I can tell you this, the last thing I want to know is that the government is choosing a pediatrician for my grandson. That just bothers me. But as a part of the larger budget question, when you think of every dollar that the federal government spends, we are borrowing over 40 cents on the dollar for our spending. And that is continuing to grow. The people who are going to pay that 40 cents back are our children and our grandchildren. That is going to destroy the American dream because our children and our grandchildren are already beholden to a huge budget deficit, and our children and grandchildren will be paying the sins of us right now if we don't get the budget under control. So unfortunately, it's just too good a political talking point for both sides to actually come together and do what has to be done. But it's very important that we continue to fight for reining in the size and scope and the cost of federal government. I think that it's very fair that we say we want a federal government that is more responsive to our needs, that is streamlined, and I think it's very important to recognize we don't need to continue to grow the size of bureaucracy. So I think that we can agree on that. But Randy, stay tuned. I don't think you'll see a budget sunset at all. Daniel.
On the healthcare bill, there's so much stuff in there that it seems like it goes beyond health. I mean, there's a couple of taxes that are something. Why do they put so many other different things in? I mean, is that tax for real estate to support that bill, or are there just things that people kind of adding, well, if I'm going to sign off on it, I want my thing added?
That's a great question, and probably a little bit of both, but the taxes that most immediately come to mind to me are in order to offset the cost, to raise the revenue for the cost. But what's not measured in this is, again, the waste, fraud, and abuse that would be in the system. And again, I go back to the prescription drug example of 148 million diverted in 2007 alone. Now you're going to have to decrease that exponentially and recognize that it's not going to be affordable. So the taxes are to offset the cost to some degree. Some sin taxes, my favorite one is the tanning bed tax. That's in there. I mean, you're not going to certainly pay for Obamacare healthcare by a tanning bed tax, but it definitely was to try to offset the cost. But it is important to recognize that Obamacare also does dismantle Medicare as we know it. And so, good question. Hi, Margaret. Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm curious about where the undocumented worker position is going. I heard rumblings that there's going to be some amnesty by Obama. I know there's also some work being done here in our state of California for the program.
Great question. Federal government, unfortunately, Congress is definitely stuck on this. We cannot come together, but we need a comprehensive plan to address illegal immigration. We need I think a three-point plan that makes it simple. First, to enforce the borders. You have to talk northern as well as southern. You have to talk airports and seaports. And then you have to have interior enforcement, a E-Verify sort of program. I think that it's important that we have a robust non-amnesty guest worker program as well. And I do think it's unrealistic to say that we're going to deport millions of people and send them home. And I think we need to come up with a plan where people can actually apply for a guest worker program within the United States. And I think that's the direction that Senator Perez is trying to go. I applaud him for that effort. Don Solterra.
1544.
That's a House bill?
No, 1544 is a state bill.
That's
authored by
Assembly.
Assembly bill, and it's authored by Perez and a Republican lady from the north.
Okay.
Fresno from Chief.
Awesome. The only problem I have with this is immigration is a federal issue. And I think it's going to create problems. I mean, we've seen this in Arizona. We need to address this on the federal level, not the state level, but I applaud his approach. And I think it's realistic. You know, in the presidential debates, I think, although I'm a Mitt Romney supporter, I think Newt Gingrich was a lot more realistic about how to approach this. So, again, non-amnesty guest worker program, enforce the borders, and have strong interior enforcement, and a realistic approach to solving the problem, and get beyond sound bites and talking points, and we can get it done. Yes?
Just on that note, I know that the Assembly member has introduced that piece of legislation because of the failure of any action from the federal government position. But my question is in regards to foreclosures in Riverside County, being one of the highest counties that is taking foreclosures in the country. We at local government have to deal with that on a practical basis, quality of life issues. What are you, the Riverside congressional delegation, federal government, bailed out the banks, telling to support families to stay in their home doing? Is there more to be done at the federal level to ensure that banks are being sensitive to the issue and the effects that it has here in our local communities?
That's a great question. And of course, we've seen a lot of effort by the banks to rein in what subprime has created. Loaning to people who didn't necessarily qualify for the loans had they had stronger regulations in place. A lot has been done on that front. There's a bigger question that here all of us as elected officials should ask. You know, one of the reasons that we and Nevada and Florida were the hardest hit areas was because our housing industry was the most robust. But anytime you look at that situation, and I think we need to recognize that perhaps our housing sector is growing faster than the rest of our economy, and that sometimes the local planning agencies have to say, as we build these houses and grow our communities, are we diversifying our economy enough to sustain the growth that we're building? So, you know, we at some time have to look back in the mirror here and say, how do we locally address this issue? Because to tell you the truth, the federal government can put in more regulations, and more people would say right now it's become too hard to qualify for a loan. People can, or, you know, either it's easy to refinance for some people and you can't refinance it for other people. So there's been somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction to it. But I would argue that we need to make sure that we diversify our economy so that we're not entirely based on the building trade.
To keep our families in our homes from the federal government standpoint, I guess is the question. Is there more that the federal government can do to ensure that families are not losing their homes?
Well, what the best thing the federal government can do right now is grow the economy. Absolutely. People have more money in their pocket, less taxes they have to pay. You can grow the economy, people can have jobs. Jobs are the #1 issue right now. I think we need to make sure there are jobs. If you look at the Federal Code of Regulations, the book is 150,000 pages long. You know, the federal government is not making it easier to create jobs, it's making it harder. So I would argue that the first thing we ought to do is make it easier to grow jobs. I don't know that there's going to be a regulation, and you have to remember that it's almost a closed loop system, that you also have a responsibility to the investors, to people who invest in mortgages. You have to look at it in its totality and not simply act as if it's so easy to keep somebody in their house, but without looking at the entire marketplace and recognizing what you're doing. But I would say to all of us that it's important that we continue to diversify the local economy. I think, you know, I'm using Stagecoach and Coachella because the time is nearly upon us. And I know we're talking about how Sizzler is going to be packed. Kids are going to be sleeping on the roof. He said, and on the grass and in the parking lot. And trust me, the next day I'll be flying up to Washington, D.C. and they'll be sleeping on the carpeting at the Palm Springs Airport. But this is an example of growing our economy. I know Glenn is here. He's been very helpful for Stagecoach and Coachella. But this is one example of growing the economy. and continuing to support other sectors. I can, do you want to say something?
Oh, no, I'm happy.
No, go ahead.
Talking about jobs, when can we all get back on the same page to create these jobs? So that we can help with all the bills, not all, but quite a few of them.
That's a great question, and I actually think it's going to be the crux of the focus on the presidential campaigns in the fall. It's going to be the jobs, economy, and sort of economic indicators. I think we are all on the same page, but I think there's a difference in understanding whether we want more government or less government. And those of us who think that more government just interferes with business, you know, and I remember back to when signing out of the restaurant, you know, government regulators were really a pain in the rear, and if they were having a bad day, they hurt us badly. They didn't help our business, they hurt our business. And, you know, there's no question that 150,000 pages of federal regulations, somewhere in there, there's opportunity to remove some of those and to streamline business. I passed a bill, it's one of the few bills this Congress that has actually made it through the Republican House, Democrat Senate, and onto President Obama's desk and signed into law. It was a bill entirely aimed at the Consumer Product Safety Commission. I don't know how many of you have to deal with them or approve them, but they regulate and they talk about safety of all products, especially children's products. But they had such an arcane rule that was coming out that they wanted to remove get lead levels to such a low level in children's products. And that sounds really great. I didn't know there was lead in things like children's bibs and things like this, but there is. Jewelry. But the rule was so extreme that it also meant bicycles and ATVs. So as of July of this past year, had we not passed this bill, they could no longer, American manufacturers could no longer manufacture bicycles and ATVs and anything with a higher lead content in it. Now, only the federal government can talk about how ridiculous some of our rules and regulations can be. But if you have a ceiling fan, for example, this is my favorite example because I love the visual, but a ceiling fan that any of us have in our bedroom at home, it's not regulated if it's on a children's product. If it's a brown one and it's on the children's room ceiling, it's not regulated by being a child's product. But if there's a sticker of Tinkerbell on it, put on there by the manufacturer, it's regulated by the federal government. And I love this example because the lead content issue is if your child is going to be gumming or teething on something. And the visual of your child teething on a ceiling fan to me, and the government regulating the lead content of a ceiling fan because of the child potentially gumming the ceiling fan, just doesn't make sense. And I think if we as lawmakers go through the code of regulations and find these sorts of examples. But I'm also incredibly proud to say that I found a Democrat, Mark Pryor of Arkansas, to work with on the Senate side, and President Obama signed it into law. I still believe in bipartisanship. I'm working on, but at this point in time, it's harder and harder. I'm working a lot on internet privacy and on database notification, database breach security, and looking for bipartisanship there, especially on the Senate side. Very involved in cybersecurity. I have John McCain's bill on the House side, which would address cybersecurity issues as well. These are all related to business and to growing business and not getting government regulation in the way that will cripple business. So that's the approach I take and like to take and continue to take. Thanks for this time. Good morning.
Good morning. Mary, thank you for coming. With regard to the immigration issue, is it possible that if this state can pass legislation that will deal with this and give safety net to people that are here, a system like Reagan had in his administration, we could get things solved? Can you suggest a way to keep the federal government out of that immigration issue when they're not doing anything, and we as a state are trying to do something because it's an important issue to our state? Does that make any sense?
It makes sense, but I don't agree with it. Immigration is a federal issue, absolutely. And especially I would argue that Arizona's approach is entirely different from what Assemblyman Perez is trying to do. So then how do you manage Arizona's border, California's border is entirely different than the people within those borders. It is 100% a federal issue. It needs to be dealt with on the federal level. California can lead the way in legislation in a lot of areas because of the size of the market. California can set, fuel efficiency standards because the market is so big. They can do a lot with technology. But there's no market here that will override the importance of the federal government to do its job. So, although it's very noble, I would beg to differ because you cannot approach immigration differently on the border. But I applaud his efforts, and if they can start a rational conversation, perhaps it will catch on for the rest of the country. But as far as getting a bill signed into law, I think it could be a problem for the federal government. It would probably be, my guess is there would be a court challenge that would strike it down. So, let me go to somebody I haven't gone to. Good morning.
I was at yesterday at the town hall, and I was very impressed by your participation in such an issue that is killing our children. And I would love to see more about so when you come and see what happens in society. I'm a retired teacher, and my heart is children that are dying in the noise. Also, like could you remind us a little bit about Proposition 29?
Proposition 29, I generally don't take positions or advocate for or against state propositions. I'm busy enough in Washington to not get too involved with the state issues, but I would encourage you, your senator or state senator here, to ask him that question.
I'm concerned about more prices for the small business people, and that's why people are moving out here to California. And more and more.
Her question is, that she's concerned about higher taxes on small business. There's no question, and California has at least a double whammy with our taxes and our regulations. As I'm working to bring manufacturing back to America, there's terrific opportunity to do this. Most of these large-scale manufacturers won't even look at California because of the high energy prices and the huge regulatory hurdles that they have within the state of California. And it's very unfortunate because we should be doing all we can to lure them back. Something that I'm doing and working on, you would be surprised to know that many of these large-scale manufacturers have good manufacturing operations, but have never been considered the thought of moving onto tribal land. So it's something that I'm trying to encourage the tribes to do, to diversify their own economy, to go after some of these manufacturers who are looking to leave Mexico or China for various reasons, whether it's the wage increases that they're seeing in China, whether it's some of the violence within Mexico. A lot of these large companies, Fortune 100 companies, want to leave. And I would encourage them to even, and for us perhaps, to put forth a package about why we could put good, clean manufacturing on tribal land within the state of California even, and have it be a local economic growth engine for us. So the other point is that business cannot afford, small business cannot afford. And I remember when Sonny and I had the restaurant, a lot of you have been around as long as I have. I see Kay down there. Kay Hayes has been here, I think, longer than I have. But 25 years ago, every summer, we rolled up the sidewalks. We closed our businesses in August, July, August, September. He put, gone fishing signs in our windows. You don't see that too much anymore. And that's a really good sign that out here we are growing. But I remember those days that when we stayed open because we didn't want to lose our employees over the summer. We wanted to keep our waiters and our kitchen staff and keep them employed, but we had to struggle to get by. And I can tell you this though, if my tax bill had been higher at that point in time, I would have had to pay the tax man before I could pay my employees, so I would have had to close my business. So I understand firsthand what that would have done. And that could, if that happens even in Palm Springs, where people have higher tax burdens in the summer months, you can see a little bit more of these sorts of problems. So I recognize what higher taxes on small business will do. It's not the way to go. Actually, I think less taxes is the way to go, without a doubt, and people would actually hire more employees and not worry about the tax man showing them how to do it. And last thing I just want to say a little bit about taxes. This is that wonderful time of year where those of us who were prepared are happy to be done with doing our taxes. More of my friends are still actually worrying about, what they're doing today as they're doing their taxes. But as a member of Congress, I've seen at least one senior cry to me, not because he had to pay the taxes, but because of how complicated it is to do his tax return, and what the burden was for him and how overwhelmed he was. This was an 80-year-old man. And to talk about that, how intimidating and overwhelming it is. So streamlining and simplifying the tax code would also go a long way, I think, for all of us, small businesses as well as individuals. And thank you for being there yesterday at the town hall. I appreciate that very much. Yes, sir. Oh, you get a microphone.
Oh, thank you. Mary, I'd just like to say, I'd like to compliment you, first of all, on the prescription drug laws that you're trying to enact, because I wanted to remind everyone, Ryan Leaf, I don't know if anybody knew him, he was the #2 draft pick in the NFL. He had an article in the paper recently, was arrested in Montana, and it wasn't just because of his addiction to prescription drugs, but he'd also committed lots of burglaries at the time. So the problem does manifest itself in many levels, so that's important. But I have questions about, we talk about jobs are number one, but the future of those jobs comes with the education of our children. And I think a lot of things happen in Washington that sometimes handicap us or handcuff us here at the local level. And I was just wondering about the No Child Left Behind, where you see that going in the future, and other mandates that sometimes come to us at the state level that don't get funded at the federal level, and how we can better receive some of that funding, because schools today are really strapped for cash.
Well, No Child Left Behind was a noble attempt, but it was really more of an attempt to solve a political problem, not truly address education. There is a huge clamor to increase our, thank you, to increase our education, the level, all across the board, especially technology people in the tech sector are really struggling to find engineers to get kids through our schools and passionate about the sciences and technology. But I have to tell you the truth, I have a really hard time with the federal government in control of education anyway. I think that parents and teachers should decide. When we moved to California 48 years ago, part of the reason my parents moved here was because the school systems were so great. And they were different. Our school systems were great because, there was a local focus on them, and it made them, they were so much better than some of those around the country. I think we need to get back to that a little bit more. I think put parents and teachers in charge and empower school boards to make decisions and to get the bureaucrats out of the way. In Washington, D.C., if you give a bureaucrat money and ask them to then come up with regulations and then to send the money back home again, all you're doing is getting rules and losing some of your money along the way. It's hard for me, though, because I truly believe in that. The reason it's hard for me, and I have to walk the walk here, a lot of folks in the recovery world come to me with their curriculum, their suggested curriculum, their video that they've come up with, their documentary. Gee, Mary, can you get this into every school in America for me? And I have to let them down when I say, no, you need to go to your local school board and talk to them and engage your local school board. Because if you talk about the education level and how to improve the academics, but if you liken that to the drug problem, and you instead say, if your school board doesn't care about it, isn't passionate about it, and that's who parents need to really work closely with and make passionate about it, you're certainly not going to get a bureaucracy to do it in Washington, D.C. So for me, No Child Left Behind, I would rather instead do all I can to empower our local school boards to make the decisions. And you know what? Sometimes they might make mistakes. Absolutely. But when they do, then the parents ought to be able to walk into that school board meeting and make a difference and say, this has to change. My child matters. And I think the worst thing that we've done as a society over the past 40 years is to tell people, you can't go to your school board and make a difference. I mean, how many of you have ever gone to a school board meeting? All the leftists. Not all. Some not on the leftists. But other people were involved with public health or whatever. But for a parent to think that your only answer is in Washington, D.C. for your child's education, it's just wrong. It's entirely wrong. So I would like to do the opposite. And I'll continue to say, and even walking the walk with my drug education efforts, I'm starting with my local school boards. And that's what I want to strengthen. So I would rather quit sending the money to Washington. I'd rather Washington quit sending us the mandates. And I'd like to keep the money and the efforts and the focus here locally.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I know it's legal, and then I'll come back to you. Good morning.
Quickly, we're in very challenging times. I mean, we had our city council meeting last night in La Quinta, and because of the redevelopment change with the state, and our capital budget going from 65 million to 15 million down to 1 million to maintain our city. And when you look at the reality of the state, the nation, what excites you, besides your grandchild, what excites you to get up every day and want to fight the fight and do the battle to, and how do you feel accomplished at the end of the day, a week, a month, given the situation and the hope for improvements in jobs and economy and housing and survival and being a player in this world?
What excites me?
Yes.
Is the basic question about getting up and doing what I do. Well, first of all, the drug thing, I know we're making a difference. I know that in Congress I have 434 colleagues in the House of Representatives, and I know that 434 of them are focused on the budget and gas prices, as they should be. There are issues that we all care about, national security, we don't talk enough about these days, the war on terror, cybersecurity. But I can tell you this, I think I'm the only one talking about the drug issue. And when you're the only one talking about it, when you see you're making a difference, it feels pretty good. Secondly, I believe that at this point, I'm passionate and excited that I think our country is at a crossroads. I think we are at a point now where we can see whether big government programs and solutions are the answer or whether we need to empower ourselves locally. The RDA money is a perfect example. How do you feel as a city council when your money is being taken away and sent to Sacramento? Is it better for your citizens, or is it harder? Well, the federal government's even worse. And it's the same thing. The state is a small example of what will happen with Washington and what is happening. The difference is the state cannot borrow money. The federal government can. So the state can come after your redevelopment money today. The federal government is going after our children's money by leveraging their futures. And that is the big difference. So if we can sort of compare that RDA money and how you feel as the person closest to the people on the city council, and then extrapolate that up to the federal level, you'll see how the city is and how we need to change things. And I don't care what city you're representing, whether you're in the county, but we're all faced with this. And it's hardest for people who have to say directly to people's faces, I'm sorry, I can't provide a service for you anymore because Sacramento needs the money. So that, I'm passionate about that. And I'll say this. I am so passionate about this that my husband is running for the United States Senate in Florida. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks. He looked at this opportunity. I think Florida is critically important in this battleground. I think it's going to be important for the presidential race. The polling data was wide open for him. And he said to me, we're really hard on this as a couple. And I said, it's worth it. Everything is on the line right now in our country. Absolutely everything. And if we don't change the direction of our country and give people what they want, that is a truly efficient federal government where we're secure, where our interests are secure around the globe, but then let's just go about our business every day. I think it's worth it. So he's fighting his fight in Florida, and I'm fighting my fight here. But our children have now seen, I think, that they recognize the RDA example is the best example we can possibly use. Our money grab is just hidden because we're borrowing it. So thank you for pointing to it. I know I'm going to do one more because I've got to be boring the heck out of you guys. But yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Maury. Welcome. You were born and raised for very, I'm welcoming the challenges. But
I just want to say that there's a lot of positive things that we need to really take a look at as well. Edward mentioned about, we've all had friends and families that have lost their homes. But on the upside, we also have 800 to 1,000 homes being bought a month here in the Coachella Valley. And it gives us an opportunity to embrace a lot of wonderful people that are buying homes. And that is going to make a difference in our economy. So if we can encourage people to, really do well in their business, to, basically embrace people from Canada, from all over the world that's buying homes, I think that is going to make a difference. I have 5 educators in my family too that teach in schools, and they have their challenges, having 40 kids in the classroom, and we all face these different challenges. My parents are getting over prescriptions too, and we have to keep an eye on them as well. And you know, every day has its challenges, but I know that every morning I get up and I want to make a difference in my community. And so if we just do that, give it our best, I believe we'll make a difference.
I love that statement. Thank you. I think recognizing the American dream and celebrating it is so important. And I thank you for that statement, because you're right. And especially we as a community, and I'll just close on this. I'll close on that. I was going to say that what I love about our community is, for the most part, we all work together so well. And I've always said that we're like a baseball team. We have different positions on this team, but we work together well. And we might not always agree on policy and all of this stuff. But I would say that we do drive our community forward, and we see a lot of progress. And yes, there are setbacks, no doubt about it, but there's a lot of good to talk about. Thank you for your sunny disposition. You'd think that we were at a Rotary Club meeting with that comment, not a chamber. Okay, yes.
Mary, my name is Rose Tijerina Swearingen, and I've been in the field of recovery and addiction for just about 35 years. I really like that you're passionate about the drug problem that we have in our communities and our world today. But the most important thing for me, as I think of what we're going through right now, is that our children are our focus for the future. And our children are not getting that foundation. I wish that along with what you're saying and what you're offering us and the help that you're giving us, that, I always said I worked at the Betty Ford Center for 10 years before opening up my own business in Palm Springs, the Life's Journey Center. And I always said, I wish that the Betty Ford Center would implement their children's program in every school throughout the nation. Why? Because the children would get the foundation that you today are working on addressing with adults. I know that adults are important, but I believe that children, again, are our future, and we need to look at that. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. Another example of, let's start with the local school board. As school boards around the country, if we succeed with our children here, other school boards around the country will duplicate what we do. So I look forward to working with you and taking it to our school boards and seeing how they think that we can help with our kids.
Thank you.
All right, the last question. Thank you both. You've been so patient.
Hi.
By the way, I don't care if it's the last question. I would assume you guys want it to be the last question, but I'll go on as long as you want me to.
Hi, Rose. Remember me?
Yes, I do.
My name is Norma Shida, and I used to supervise the treatment center years back. That's how I met Rose. And now, not only was I a supervisor, I was also a therapist with clients that came in, and it was a treatment center for opiates, prescription drugs. My question to you is, during your plan, what you plan that you have for the prescription drugs, what I used to see that it was very depressing for me, that I couldn't do it anymore, seeing how many people overdose and die under prescription drugs. And what I found when clients would come in, they will have the same prescriptions with different doctors and different pharmacists. So then they were through Medi-Cal, and that's how they were selling the drugs outside. So in your plan, is there going to be a connection that this is a prescription drug, but if they go try to see like 4 or 5 doctors regarding the same prescription, is there going to be a block in somewhere in the computer system that, no, you provided this already, you're not going to have this again? I was just curious.
There are a lot of efforts in Washington, D.C. That are supporting what we call prescription drug monitoring programs. Anybody who actually tries to go to get your prescriptions filled who are on private insurance know that if you try to fill a prescription too soon, your insurance company will reject you. In the addiction world, because a lot of times it is funded sometimes by the Medicare Part D or Medi-Cal. There are loopholes there. California, we don't have a real-time prescription drug monitoring program. It exists, but it's 2 weeks. It takes 2 weeks for the system to get caught up, which is ridiculous. Because we know that, right now I can buy something on my iPad and charge it instantaneously, and the credit card company will know right away. And we can do it if we decide to do it. We also know, today I took my Claritin D, has pseudoephedrine in it, And if you want to buy anything with Sudafed in it, you have to give your driver's license to do it. We have to do it, but we're not going to make that change if we don't raise the awareness that people are dying from these drugs. And so doctors shall be part of the answer is going to be paying for the prescription drug monitoring programs. The important thing from these physicians are beginning to participate. Yesterday we had 2 doctors who were there in our town hall meeting. This is not a punitive approach to doctors to say, bad view, you better check it. This is not a holistic approach. That a doctor ought to be able to look at the whole host of prescriptions that they're writing for somebody to see if they're being overprescribed or if they have a dangerous combination. Yesterday, Dr. Hartunian from the Betty Ford Center talked about a dangerous mix of alcohol and opiates. People go to sleep and they never wake up.
That's what I saw. I mean, my job as a supervisor was sitting in the files to the board. I mean, it was pretty depressing. So, I mean, that's why I had to quit that and went to private practice.
I thank you both for everybody who works in this effort because it is sometimes a thankless job. But we're over 30,000 deaths a year right now in America. And probably since I've been speaking this morning, 8 people have died in America from this. And I know that we can make a difference by keeping the people off of these drugs. And secondarily, especially here on the border, and by the way, I've talked to President Calderon about this. I've talked to President Santos in Colombia about this. Because of the opiate problem here, which is prescription drug-based, the kids, everybody, I shouldn't just say the kids, they move off of the prescription drugs and move on to heroin. Heroin trafficking out of Latin America is on the increase. The violence with heroin trafficking will be on the increase. I told President Calderon that I agree with him that the demand in America needs to be reduced. He can't fight the fight alone. We need to help them by having a demand reduction in America. If we don't, we're going to see nothing but bad times ahead.
And I agree with what Rose said. Children need to be educated in schools because they just grow up and they're doing the same thing over and over again. It's pretty sad, but thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Who hasn't asked me yet? Who's just itching to ask?
Hi, good morning. My question is more in regards to immigration since the topic came up. Do you happen to know the ratio between those that cross illegal and those that overstay their visas?
I don't know the ratio.
Okay. Just to give you an idea, I mean, for every 1 illegal that crosses, there's 3 that overstay their visas. So you don't think that should be an issue that should be addressed? I know you said that we should reinforce the borders, but what about the airports and the seaports?
No, I did say that.
And I know you said that, but wouldn't you agree that the federal government should be looking at those that overstay their visas as well?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's the whole problem. I mean, many of the people overstay their visas, and I would point out, although most people are quick to say that it's Latinos primarily, but I would also say that there are a lot of illegal Brits and Canadians and you name it who overstay their visas. You change the focus to terrorist-based visas, people who are now coming to America, believe it or not, on student visas who have links to Al-Qaeda. So we have had to wake up to the whole issue of immigration and to sort of change our thinking. If you look at the Millennium Plot, when we turned from 1999 to 2000, there was a serious, what was the New Year's? It was the Millennium Plot. And that border breach was in Seattle. So, we have to really look at all of the borders, and of course visas are a huge part of it. I mean, if somebody is here illegally because they've overstayed their visa or they've crossed illegally, it's the same thing. They both need to be addressed. I would just say oftentimes my congressional office helps people who have a problem with immigration. I'd like to introduce Claudia Flores if anybody doesn't know Claudia. Claudia is a great asset to my office, and she's working hard to make sure people know that my office is there to assist with immigration issues. We work on any, tax issues, veterans issues, any problem dealing with the federal government. We are there to assist people who have visa problems legitimately. So just remind people to never hesitate to give us a shout. But of course, we would look at that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to, one more. Okay. I should never say one more.
One more.
economist and I comment often in the news and so forth. I just wanted to say on the, how do you balance, for example, you were saying, we live in a tourist town here, in a resort town. And so it is my personal belief as an economist that the more, responsible visa allowance you give, the more economy you could bring to the town, right? On the other hand, you want to restrict those to keep out Al-Qaeda terrorists and all the bad guys, right? So how do you balance giving out more visas and restricting them?
That's a great question. It's a State Department issue, and I actually have talked to Secretary Clinton about this, because she does care deeply about how we do that, recognizing the hurdles that people face who want to legitimately come to America to see the country, and those who don't want to. There's a lengthy interview process that they go through. I think, again, we're counting on bureaucrats to do their job and to do it right, to figure out who is good to come in and who is not. And I cannot comment necessarily on what it's like to be one of those individuals doing the interview, but I do know that it's much more extensive than it used to be. And oftentimes people complain because it's a big burden. And so I don't know if we've gotten it quite right yet, but I do know that the State Department and Secretary Clinton has focused on that herself. I was with her in, I'm in Colombia next weekend, I think, with Secretary Clinton again. I was with her 2 years ago down in, Trinidad and Tobago at a conference, and Secretary spoke very much to that problem on how to find the balance. So I don't have the answer, but I admit there's a problem. Thank you. All right. Is that good? We're going to
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Congresswoman Bono Mack.